here, and I'm going to allow them to, you've already seen two of them present this morning, and Ashlesha will be presenting mid-afternoon, I believe. So let's start with Arthur. Go ahead, please. It's quick intros.
Oh, sure. Well, I spoke to you all this morning. I am the co-director of the Center for the Study of the Drone. It is a small research institute in upstate New York affiliated with Bard College. I'm also a journalist and author, and as you all know, my new book is Eyes in the Sky and the Secret Rise of Golden Stare, and how it will watch us all.
Babar, Bhatti, co-founder and organizer of Dallas AI, former entrepreneur, and very active in the Dallas area with startups as well as with companies building AI products.
Hey everyone, my name is Ashlesha Nesarikar. I'm founder and president of Plano Intelligence Inc. We are a startup here in Texas, and a little bit later on I'm going to be presenting a demo of our AI platform called iNotify, which we are using to help prevent gun violence and do threat mitigation.
Terrific. I'm Ardire, AI Startup Advisor, presented Augmented Intelligence for Future Work right before lunch. And so we're going to dive in. I have no slides, but I have all the talking points here on my laptop, and we're just going to go through sequential order. We're going to leave some time at the end for questions, because this is a very interesting topic. Obviously, from the sessions this morning that you heard, a lot of people resonate with this. So I'm going to start off with kind of a bold, edgy statement to get the ball rolling, and we'll do round robin chime in. So the problem with AI ethics is from mostly the big companies is responsible AI development is just ethics washing to avoid government regulation with no transparency, and mostly lip service from the big companies in terms of addressing this. Comments?
Yeah, when it comes to ethics in AI, I kind of wear a lot of hats here, so I divide up that issue into three distinct areas. Now I look at this with open eyes. I try and keep an open mind, so here are those three areas. First, as a computer scientist and a researcher, I believe that all research, and that is inquiry into social or physical phenomenon, should be allowed, as long as, and we do have this, processes in place to preserve the ethics of that research. So for example, we have IRB review, where we have a panel of technical experts who look at your research plan and make sure that when you have human subjects, you're doing that research ethically. Now, secondly, I say this as an entrepreneur and a citizen of the United States, which is, I'll give an example here. Say we're wanting to thwart an ongoing or an imminent terrorist threat. In that case, today with facial recognition, we're able to recognize the perpetrator in a crowd within seconds instead of, say, weeks or days. And that gives our first responders basically every advantage that we are able to give them right now. So within the bounds of the Constitution, we should give them every advantage that we can. So this is what my talk is a little bit later on. I hope you're able to see that. We built an application very similar to this, where we're hoping to do threat mitigation. Lastly, and I think this comes back to your question and the purpose of this panel, that is unwieldy use of technology to control and manipulate society in general. quick show of hands here, how many of you have heard of the Chinese social credit system?
It's one of our follow-up questions, by the way.
Awesome, awesome. So I'll go briefly over it then.
Yes.
To me, it looks like a slow-moving cultural revolution all over again, where we have the state which can force submission through social shame or denying basic services to its citizens. So they're using facial recognition in this case to basically as an enhanced Big Brother tool. They're following their citizens anywhere and everywhere they go and using facial recognition to keep track of their actions. Personally, I have a very strong conviction in democratic societies and in our way of life. So I will resist, and I consider it my duty to oppose any move towards using AI or facial recognition as a means to control the masses at the expense of personal liberties.
That's a great opening statement, very commendable, very well, and very thoughtful. And some of the downstream questions are going to really address exactly what Ashlesha really pointed out here. San Francisco is an example, said no facial recognition, whereas other cities are on board with that. But before I get into Arthur and Babar, here's a couple instantiation with level of detail. Google cancels their AI ethics board because of the response to the outcry. There have been articles like, hey, Google, sorry you lost your AI ethics board, so we made one for you. Don't treat AI ethics like a PR game or a technical problem. Chime in, please.
Sure. I guess the point that I would make is that the challenge that we're dealing with at the moment is that the regulation has failed to keep pace with technological innovation. I mentioned the example earlier of how we have this incredible military-grade technology which is entirely legal to use, and that is entirely a result of the fact that the regulations that it is subject to were developed long before that technology even existed. There are a few ways to get ahead of that, but I think, speaking to this crowd, the one that I would stress is that companies that make these tools that could potentially be dangerous need to be very forthcoming about what those dangers are. They need to be the first in the charge in raising awareness about how what they're doing is difficult and dangerous and potentially raises urgent questions that everybody should be talking about. That is not something that I have seen from the tech industry. I've seen the tech industry be responsive to public criticism and say, okay, we're going to create ethics boards and have ethics advisors, but I have not seen a laundry list, for example, from Google about what this technology could do for ill, particularly in the hands of, say, an authoritarian regime. When I spoke to a lot of the people developing this technology, they were actually eager to talk about these dangers. And that's a very healthy thing. In fact, I always, in every interview, plan to bring up the question of privacy and ethics and civil liberties. And in every single case, my interview subject brought it up before I had a chance to, because they were so excited to speak about it.
And you just reinforced, they're treating it as a PR game. There's no accountability. And the other thing, too, to add spice to it, is that there's just a disastrous lack of diversity as well that has been touched upon. Babar, why don't you chime in?
Yeah, I think today we are in a situation where companies are really looking at it as a threat to their reputation or as a risk mitigation against lawsuits. And it's a natural tendency to kind of protect themselves, but they would be better off taking a proactive approach and saying, we are using AI in a responsible manner, and define what that is, and invite the public and their customers to comment on that. And that's a hard thing to do, because a lot of the companies who today control the flow of data, which is the big asset of the future, they're making a lot of money from it.
Correct.
And it's counter to their bottom line. And There are some algorithms which can make recommendations, but they can make recommendations for things that may be very, very harmful to the society.
You're right. In fact, the German Justice Minister wants digital firms, Facebook and Google, to share their collected data. There's been a recent movement article from Holland in Europe. Europe should ban AI for mass surveillance and social credit scoring. We'll talk more about that. So you're starting to see, more in Europe, some in this country, correct, that is addressing this to your opening statement, which is positive. Like you said, remain optimistic. I like, what you stated in your session this morning about that. It has to be more, and we're not relying on, the media is just horrible at, at addressing this objectively as well, so.
Well, I guess one of the points that I think is important to stress is that in this process that Ashlesha referred to, there are multiple different stakeholders and they each play a different role, and they can't be expected to not play the role that they play. Engineers will develop new technologies. You can't expect anything other from them. Journalists will publish on the truth. They will push at the bounds of secrecy. Ideally, governments will respond through democratic processes of accountability. The judiciary will hold the legislative branch accountable if it seems to be in breach of the Constitution. We have to have some faith in the process that allows all of those different participants to come together and balance against each other. I think it is fundamentally unhealthy if we point at any one given stakeholder and say they're breaking the system. They shouldn't be doing what they're doing. Because the system thrives off a mutual understanding that we all come to this process and in good faith participate in it. So I would push back a little bit on the accusation that the media is sort of derailing the process a little bit, because they're doing what they've always done and what the expectation is. And if a company wants to correct what the media has said, then it plays that role, and they have that right.
I agree with what you said. We have different stakeholders in this debate, and not the specific debate, but this debate around the world. We have engineers, we have the media, we have the government. So I think whatever change comes about, for it to be effective and lasting change, needs to come at a societal level. So as a girl in technology, I have seen that consistently throughout these debates, and all debates really, that we are missing one ingredient, which is empathy. Now, I'm also an engineer, so you show me a problem, I will immediately be thinking of different ways to solve that problem. So the 3 points that come to mind on this, with societal change in mind, is first, I think we can agree on protecting minors. So, for example, no facial recognition on minors, ever. So when it comes to children, no consent, no lack of knowledge, no legal loophole is acceptable. And when that regulation comes about, it should come about through a democratic process. Second, for adults, at a minimum, follow the existing privacy rules. And if community-wide consent is required to change those rules and improve upon them, then those should come about by democratic process. And lastly, when it comes to research, make things like facial recognition standalone criteria for IRB review. So definitely, I think what both of you have been saying here is bring in all the stakeholders is a must for bringing about lasting change with us.
No, well said. So I promised to get back to the social credit system in China. So basically, the results of this, if your behavior, whether you have public intoxication, jaywalking, you're using too much toilet paper. This is a quote from an article, I'm not kidding. Their social credit will either go up or down. It's really, they have, 1.4 billion people and there's no opt out. It's all opt in. This particular article, as far as the cameras, as we move to more of a facial recognition discussion here. So they're like, it says China's really egregious, Britain's not that far behind. With facial recognition, creeping into the police force. The US purportedly an estimated 50 million cameras here, but to some of the excellent points from the panel, the localities across America are starting to ban its use, like I said, San Francisco. And now there's other Oakland, Berkeley, Somerville, Massachusetts. So you're starting to really see certain states, obviously California. In my state of Washington State, we proposed a statewide ban on facial recognition. So both our senators are introducing legislation to prevent companies from tracking you through facial recognition. So with that said, let's talk about the facial recognition part, okay? So I gave you the table setter on this here. So is it going to come down to certain states like, legalization of marijuana, which are Colorado and Washington, but is it, so you have, the interesting thing in Washington State is Microsoft has backed the state's facial recognition, whereas Amazon has not. Let's take that one.
So facial recognition, and I've spoken a bit on this, whatever we decide, especially with these large companies that you allude to, we cannot rely on them to self-regulate when it comes to facial recognition, artificial intelligence, and the likes. But they will do it if we can unite as a society, because right now, even within different realms of society, we can't agree on where do you use facial recognition and where do you not use facial recognition. When we come about that agreement through, say, regulations that are put in place through the democratic process, when these companies, customers, and their shareholders all agree on the place of facial recognition within that company, then it is the company's job, the leadership's job, to put those things in place.
So I think we should probably split the use cases into two buckets maybe. One where useful, helpful, as long as the person opts in. Others definitely, not. And then there's going to be a gray area in between. And we all know, what those black and white are, and the gray area is where we need to do more work. But I think it kind of keeps going back to the same thing, that for the companies developing this technology and the companies adopting this, they need to be really clear about what are they doing, how are they using it, and what are the possible pitfalls. Today, I don't see that level of, information being shared.
No,
And it's especially true for public data, right? Government agencies. And I don't see the level of cooperation between private and public organizations. That's a problem.
No, that's a great point you bring out, that cooperation there. Now, I'm going to just speculate a little bit. I had mentioned if this legislation in Washington State, where I live, passes, would this make Washington State, there's not going to be more, besides the economy and the environment there, more attractive versus other states that are just sitting on their thumbs and not doing anything about it?
I guess so. A given person cares about their privacy. A point I'd make about facial recognition is that for some of the truly dystopian applications that have have been predicted for the technology, we'd actually need to see the infrastructure catch up. So, you know, if you wanted to be able to track people with high levels of confidence seamlessly across the city, you're going to need to have more high-resolution cameras in more places. Same goes for the databases that are available for this data, which to me gives me some hope, because I think that we are in a position where we are somewhat ahead of the curve. You know, we have not seen total saturation in terms of market adoption of facial recognition by law enforcement in the United States. In fact, it's still a relatively small number of law enforcement agencies that have adopted facial recognition. So in that sense, the fact that people are talking about it and worrying about it before it has been adopted widely presents an opportunity. You know, it would be hard to wind back the clock on CCTV cameras, because there are, you know, tens of millions of them already installed all around the country. And then the second thing about facial recognition that gives me some amount of hope is that we understand its dangers on an intuitive level. You don't need to be an expert in data science to understand that facial recognition can be potentially abused, or simply that it's a really creepy thing that we don't want. And so in that regard, we have another opportunity for broad public engagement, because I can assure you, you ask anybody, and they will have an opinion about facial recognition. And so that could enable a greater level of engagement that I think is always going to be healthy.
Yeah, I totally agree. So I promised to leave the last 5 minutes to questions. I just wanted to make one other comment, is that some of these AI trust measurement tools and tackling, you know, AI bias, I won't name the company names. You read the makeup of these, and it's their own version of PR and hype. It's not there yet. So with that said, let's take some questions. Yes, right here, Corey.
So I have a question for Ashlesha. You said that we should give first responders every possible advantage possible. And then you also talk about democracy being through democratic processes to actually identify things. But I have a question about that, because in the past, in our own country, we've seen where we tried to give, you know, government, those first responders, every possible advantage, and that can be taken advantage of. Like we had insurance camps, right? That was not the right move, but that was the idea to give them the best possible advantage. So I don't know if that's really the right mark. Is that, have you really thought about, just because you're trying to do good doesn't mean it ends up being good? The second piece, when we talk about democracy, you're usually under this assumption that the people that are actually making that vote have understanding. Facial recognition, people can get their head wrapped around it. As soon as you go a little bit outside of that, people don't even understand what they're voting on. So how do you use democracy when your electorate isn't understanding even the ramifications? We didn't even look at the data that was collected, and all the problems that happened was because people didn't understand what they were truly giving away. Right? The Patriot's another great example of trying to do something and give them every advantage, and it was massively overused. So do you really have that belief, or is there really some limitation to what you're thinking?
Yeah, that's a great question, by the way. Whenever I say give first responders every advantage that they can use, I always say within the bounds of the Constitution. Preserve everyone's civil liberties that they're afforded by the Constitution. Now, there is a lot of debate about that, but that debate is at its core not even a technology debate. It's a debate about what are your rights as a citizen of the United States, and what are your rights as a human being. So once you take technology out of the debate, and then you decide, okay, what is everyone's personal liberty, and then it's pretty clear where you can apply technology and where you should not apply that. So that's what I mean when I say afford every advantage to our first responders. Secondly, you bring up a great point about for the layperson, facial recognition is an extremely easy thing to envision, the ramifications of that. Some other things in AI, the next steps past that, probably not as easy to envision for the average layperson. So this brings me back to what I call civic intuition of AI. So that is, well, we all here are mainly technologists, so we have a pretty good understanding of what's going on in AI and what the ramifications are. But the rest of the world, which consists of, say, experts in finance, in healthcare, in insurance, all of them are probably not experts in AI. What I say when I mean civic intuition in AI, I mean that some of us and some of them will come together to bridge that gap between the core technologists in AI who have a really good understanding of where this technology will take us, and be able to spread this information to the doctors, the lawyers, the teachers, and basically everyone who doesn't have that information on their own.
So I want to jump in here because you brought up, and that's excellent phraseology, civic intuition, it really is. So how do you foster that? It sounds great, but that's the challenge, is how do you foster that to create some kind of esprit de corps to make actionable results?
Yeah, this term actually came about when, well, part of it came about when we were seeing in AI all these breakthroughs, but they were happening within the realm of like video games. Our AI beat, the world champion at this game, and that makes our AI great. Well, that's great, but that's going to do nothing to solve real world problems. So, in building civic intuition of AI and in solving those real world problems, every team that is trying to bring together an AI solution, a technology solution, would want to have, say, a domain expert, a doctor in healthcare, a lawyer in law, and that way we can ensure that, say, everyone, maybe if they're not formally trained in computer science, in AI, they have that intuition and they're able to make an informed decision on how that technology is used.
That's great stuff. Question in the back, left, and then we'll get to you next.
This goes back to the first part of the session. In Utah, they have the State Fusion Center does facial recognition, but you have to submit a photograph that's literally portrait quality. I don't even think they'll take video because of the compression ratios. I had to work one video where the guy was compressed so much, the guy had the face. And you watch him walking around the store, and there's no facial features whatsoever. It just such smooth,
Wow.
blended complexions that, yeah, you wouldn't get anything out of that. And with compression, I don't see, I see problems working with facial recognition in the future, unless they can automate a lot of decompressing those photos and especially videos, which takes up a serious amount of real estate
Right.
storage.
No, point well taken, but I think, those technology enhancements are, will be solved. So we had a question up front.
Yes. So I have a question for the panelists related to their journeys. So what career mistake has given you the biggest lesson? That's part one of the question. Part two is, can you share your greatest accomplishment that you consider as your biggest win today?
Yeah, sure. Greatest accomplishment, and I will be honest here, I'm very young, so my career does not span all that much time, but I'm very proud of the fact that I have brought together a very talented team of young people such as myself to bring together, basically start with nothing, no platform, whatever, and build up a very capable artificial intelligence platform just among us, and being able to put that out into the world.
I saw that as well. It is very impressive. Even in Silicon Valley, this is uncanny type of stuff. The other panelists answer
And
the.
one mistake
Oh.
that's given you the greatest lesson?
Probably, in terms of a career mistake, I probably could not go back and fix this, but whatever, I started this a few years ago, about 4 years ago. I would have liked to have started it earlier. That way I would have been farther along right now.
Great answer. That's good.
She had to ask the tough question, right? Because now I can make the excuses that she made because, I made too many mistakes. So, but part of it is, you want to start early. You want to, just move fast, not wait too much. But I think I've, been happy with the way I've interacted with others and helped others figure out some of the challenges that they had that I already messed up. So at least, I could advise them, don't make the same mistakes that I made.
I guess if there was a mistake, it was assuming that a particular stakeholder to the discussion didn't have a place at the table. I think as I've matured, I've realized that even if people have agendas, it's healthy for them to participate in the discussion. My greatest achievement, a couple of days ago I spoke at a local library, and it wasn't a super well attended event, but it really made me happy to see that there was a thriving community library in 2019. And I thought, man, oh man, maybe we should all go back to our libraries. That's some very cool stuff there.
That's terrific, actually. And I think we're out of time, and I just want one final comment. What Ashley was alluded to, age 13 is the new black. Thank you very much, panelists, for a wonderful discussion.